Guys, a few days ago, leaked documentation came out to expand the definition of extremism. And then, about 2 days ago, Dan Jarvis, Security Minister, came out and said that they would not be expanding the definition of extremism. Now, I have one problem with what I've seen these past, couple of days. We understand what extremism is, and there is one ideology that is a major threat to the West. This came after Axel Rudakabana. We know that ISIS propaganda material was found with him, including ricin, including, various other things that UK intelligence services should have been aware of, but they wasn't because of their incompetency. But Islam, I made a post yesterday. Again, in Sweden, I believe on the 29th, which was 2 days ago, an activist there, was gunned down. So there's one ideology that is a major threat to the West. And they're not covert about it. They're very overt. They're like, listen, this is what we plan to do. We're coming in, you've got a weak border system. We're coming in, we're going to populate, we're going to have 5-6 kids, and it's going to be, paid for by the taxpayer in the West. They're going to be raising the kids, and eventually we want it to become a Muslim state. Many imams say this. We understand what it is. And instead of them to just be honest with the term of extremism and say that we want to go after, we want to crack down on Islamic extremism, Islamists, they then decide to bring the term far right into it as well. Yeah, we're going to be cracking down on far right, misogyny, and Muslim extremism. And I'm thinking to myself, why do you need to be politically correct? Just call it out for what it is. Axel Rudakabana was found with ISIS, propaganda material. There's a clear link here. Same in Sweden, same in Germany. I've been covering these cases a lot. There is an ideology that all of them follow. What is that? But they don't want to say. They want to be politically correct and say, no, this isn't just an Islamist problem, but a far right problem. A Hindu, they brought Hindu into it as well, a Hindu problem, a misogyny problem, Andrew Tate's to blame as well. And I'm thinking to myself, hang on, these aren't the problems here. You need to be more specific and understand and crack down on, Islamists, because we saw them last month in December causing chaos in Europe and even in America. So it's crazy. But anyway, guys, I'm going to be watching Zia Yusuf absolutely demolish Polly Billington, who is a Labour MP, and Naomi Smith. Naomi Smith is the Chief Executive Officer for Best for Britain. Now, let me tell you, she is worse for Britain. A few years ago, she wanted to reintroduce the UK back to the European Union. In addition to that, her political party has taken funding from George Soros, £400,000 a few years ago. That's all you need to hear. When they've taken money from George Soros, that's it. George Soros is big on globalist policies. He's big on weak border. He's big on mass illegal immigration. He funds it. And that's why he's funding Best for Britain. They took almost £500,000 from him. So how is she going to behave in the best interest of the British people? Absolutely not. And reintroducing the UK back to the EU, why would you want to do that when, the British people have made it clear that they want to leave the EU? So yeah, and again, I've said the last thing that UK needs is liberal governments. On top of what's been going on. No, every country in the West, Europe especially, they need strong conservative governments. Donald Trump has taken charge in the United States. European countries need to follow suit as well. Strong conservative governments that's going to revive nationalism, that's going to revive loving your country, that's going to revive putting your country first, and not these wild globalist policies that these billionaires and these lawmakers and this elite political class seem to be so keen on implementing. So none of that. We want to now do for the people, do for the people of Europe, the European citizens. So yeah. But anyway, guys, let's get straight into the debate. It's going to be, Zia Yusuf is just going to come with it, and, you can't mess with him. He has common sense logic. A lot of reform have common sense logic, honestly. Lee Anderson, him, Farage, Rupert Lowe. But anyway, guys, let's get straight to it.
Can I just come to you, Polly, first of all, in response? What do you make of what the government has done in reaction to this leaking of this partial report?
Well, like Henry, I haven't seen the report either, but it does seem to me to make sense, and I sort of slightly dispute Henry's interpretation of this as like closing down debate. They commissioned a report. They got the recommendations from the report. They decided they didn't like the
Well, hang on, they haven't said all of them, have they? I mean, it does look as if they are shutting down debate.
It's reasonable to say, well, having looked at what they've come up with, we don't want to dilute it. We think the key priorities need to be Islamic extremism and far-right extremism, so we're going to carry on with those priorities.
Well, then what was the point of having a report? But hang on, what was the report? Except that we know from the Prime Minister himself, and I paraphrase his words, but he said in response to what happened in Southport and Axel Rudakabana being convicted, is that there seemed to be a problem with lone operators in their rooms, consumed and fueled by hate, but not perhaps a specific ideology, be it religious or political. And surely this review is saying, yes, that needs to be part of the picture when it comes to a definition of extremism.
But some of those other aspects we're approaching in different ways, like, for example, tackling misogynistic hate crime and sexual offences and domestic abuse. Tackling violence against women and girls is already being done with a big programme in this country, and therefore we may not need to include that in terms of the terror definition that we've got. If the Home Office has decided that those two are the key priorities, there may well need to be other things that would come out of the public inquiry into the Southport killing, which explores other ways we might need to be able to deal with that kind of violence. But this report has the Home Office has decided there is no need to be able to change the definition.
No need or not enough resource?
Well, it might be a bit of both. I don't know, but like I say, I haven't read it any more than Henry has. But I think I can see the arguments for why they've done what they've done.
Can you see those arguments, Zia? Dan Jarvis, the minister there, was saying the government has rejected this advice, adding, as Polly was saying, Islamist extremism followed by far-right extremism are the biggest threats we face. Do you accept that?
That is not supported by the facts. If you look at Hansard, you will see, unfortunately, not trying to trigger anyone, this is just a fact, the vast majority of MI5's caseload is not far-right terrorism, it's Islamist.
Facts.
So that is a fact.
Thank you.
Yeah, but he was, well...
So that's the first point.
But he said Islamist extremism followed.
We have a government that is willing to do the most extraordinary gymnastics in order to not actually address the problem. This particular report, for example, talked about how it used the word alleged when it was describing the grooming gangs, where there have been hundreds of people who have been convicted of those atrocious crimes. We know there's been an almighty cover-up. Labour have admitted this by doing allowing some partial inquiries, albeit not the full transparent national inquiry that Reform are demanding. So what we have is a government that is willing to essentially sacrifice the lives of its own people, as far as we're concerned, at the altar of this virtue signalling diversity. It's time for common sense. It's time for us to have officials who actually do their jobs in terms of keeping people safe. The final point I'll make is the monster who carried out the Southport attacks was reported to Prevent on 3 separate occasions. Who has been fired at Prevent? Who has paid a price for this anywhere inside the state system? Those little girls, it was one of the most atrocious crimes we could ever have imagined.
All right,
There's been nobody, not a single person funded by the taxpayer whose job it was to keep those little girls alive has paid any penalty.
Well, Polly, and should there be?
Well, there are 2 things that are going on. There's the review of the Prevent strategy in order to be able to identify where there might have been things that need to change about the way the Prevent programme works. And there is also the public inquiry into all of the state failures that resulted in that. Because there are a number of times when that Southport killer was in contact with state authorities and indeed charities as well, and nothing was done. That is the appalling consequence. The appalling consequence is that atrocity in Southport, and we need to understand where and how people need to take responsibility in order to be able to avoid these kind of things happening in the future. But I would want to clarify on the record and correct the records here that Islamic extremism is one of the #1 priorities of the Home Office, as confirmed just in the Commons by my colleague Dan Jarvis.
It should be the only priority. Oh my days. I'm sorry guys, this is the only time I'm going to pause here. Only priority. Stop trying to be politically correct. Stop bringing far right into this. Stop bringing Hindu extremism into this. I saw that as well. Stop bringing, what else they bringing into this? The manosphere. No, you know, Islamism. That's what you should be tackling primarily, only. You know, stop trying to change it around to try and pander. Come on, stop.
Right, it's that and extreme right terrorism.
What proportion of MI5's caseload is far right extremism?
I don't know that number. You can ask me that number. But the point is, the Home Office has identified that both of
really
those
important
two
matters with respect. And so by conflating these issues, by chucking far right in there, it doesn't do anyone any favours. The vast majority, in excess of 90% of MI5's caseload is Islamist terrorism. So throwing in far right is deeply unhelpful if we want to have...
It is included.
It's included in the priorities of the Home Office.
Right.
That is the clarification on the record that I want to make.
Then does the definition need to change? Does it need to be expanded?
Just to add a slightly different take on it from the report, what I find is, you know, I think it's good that, well, I hope they go all the way and kind of push entirely back against this report, but it's good to hear the government distance itself very, very quickly. What I find interesting about it is this is a report that's been developed within the civil service by officials, and I actually think it shows an insight behind the curtain as to how officialdom has managed this type of process in the future. We can go to the South Pole, we can go to multiple public body failures, but it also goes to this kind of stasis. The idea that we should act as extremism when you say that there is two-tier policing in this country is an absolute farce. If anybody says that there isn't two-tier policing in this country, they are not telling you the truth. The fact that somebody can go to prison and be arrested for alleging and calling somebody a paedophile online, but actual paedophiles are not going to prison, I'm sorry, but that is a two-tier system. The fact that the Home Office thinks that that now should be regulated and looked at as an extremist view shows where the Home Office is at. And I'm not suggesting that's a political point, I'm suggesting from a civil service Home Office point of view, that is a real problem and a real concern that politicians need to be looking at.
Well, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, says the officials that produce this factually incorrect garbage, this is the review we're talking about, are unfit to serve the public. They should be fired. Polly?
Well, like I say, I'm not going to make a comment on a report I haven't read. Robert Jenrick is perfectly fine to shoot his mouth off on X or whichever social media platform he's done, but I'm not going to start that.
Nen?
I think that one thing that gets lost in a lot of this is acknowledging that behaviours are incredibly important in this. And what do I mean when I say behaviours? I do mean that it is incumbent upon not just the government, but everybody, politicians, political commentators, the media, to understand that when they say something or write a column about something, that in itself is a behaviour if it seeks to inflame and cause more social division and put certain communities at risk. Is that extremism? No, of course it isn't. A definition is just a definition. Of course it means how resources get allocated, and so it has a legal framework there. But no definition is going to please everybody. What matters is that we're addressing the behaviours that cause the harm rather than one based on definitions. And I just would remind people that the language that we all use, particularly those of us on this panel and people that come on this show and people who write in newspapers, need to be really, really careful about the language that they use, because that can tip over into some of the dreadful behaviours that we have seen over the summer riots, etc., that aren't necessarily rooted in ideology.
And there you have it, guys. You know, political correctness from Polly Billington, Labour MP, and the CEO of Best for Britain, Naomi Smith. You know, they don't want to call it out for what it is. It's Islamism. This is the problem. You know, you don't need to chuck things in. Don't do that. Don't try and pander. It's Islamism. This is the problem. And let's pray that more of this doesn't keep happening on the streets in the United Kingdom. You know, because the government's not taking, you know, this Islamist threat serious. You know, they're taking this as a joke, clearly. So yeah, but anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you at the next video. Peace.